Rob Edwards has left Luton Town Football Club, and alongside me to reflect on his tenure and look ahead at who might replace him is the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe. Jimbo is kind of a podcast we really hoped we didn't have to record.
Yeah, but it's here now, and I don't think anyone can be particularly surprised about it. However you feel one way or the other, we'll discuss that, I suppose.
Yep, we'll expand on our feelings and, as I say, talk about what comes next right after this intro.
For me, it's the people and the spirit of the people as well.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, the award-winning, longest-running Luton Town podcast, having scooped bronze in the Best Football League podcast category in the Football Content Awards. This season the show is in association with Solid, providing opportunities, provisions and assistance so our academy can fulfil their potential. As I mentioned before the intro, we are looking back on the time of Rob Edwards at Luton Town Football Club, which came to an end recently. We recorded an immediate reaction, myself and Jimbo, and now we're going to give a full sort of reflection on it. Slightly later on in the day, we've had a few hours to reflect on the news, Jimbo, and yeah, it's still sad, isn't it? Because this is a guy who, as I said in that immediate reaction, gave me the best days of my football supporting life. He allowed me to dream of things that, you know, I didn't think we could dream of really, and he made them come true. And yes, to many out there, he might have, I don't want to use the words outstayed his welcome, but that's the kind of vibe that was being, you know, bandied around by the end, which I really didn't like because he's a good guy ultimately. It just went on a little bit longer than maybe it should have done, but I think in the coolness of time, I'll reflect on the good times and the very good times rather than the last couple of months. As hard as the last couple of months have been to watch, you know, the good times were real good.
Yeah, that's the passage of time, I suppose, isn't it? I referenced after the Norwich game when it turned toxic, really, that was the first time I'd seen that reaction of fans staying behind, booing the manager, having a go at the board and staying behind. That's the first time I'd ever seen that since John Steele's last game in charge. And now, you know, John Steele's held in, you know, this massively high regard, and even to the point that when Luton were doing the pre-match press conferences for the playoff final, John Steele came back and we spoke to him again. And whether that happens with Rob Edwards, you know, will remain to be seen. That's not up to us. That's time and distance from it. But I think that shows what the possibility is. I mean, you know, John Steele got us out of the hell of non-league, and Rob got us into the dreamland of the Premier League. So they're different ends of the spectrum, really. And who could have thought at any stage back then that we'd be ever thinking or talking about Premier League football? And that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to really, really appreciate that happened, and it was Rob Edwards. For me, I'm not having the revisionism of that he just took on Nathan Jones's side. They were his players largely, but he signed Marvelous Nakamba and Cody Jame, and then he took a team that was in 10th, and we'd love to be 10th right now, but languishing, going nowhere, mid-table, and he took them to the Premier League on the back of an incredible run in just half a season. And that has to be remembered. And then he got to the Premier League and found it tough. Then sort of came a light bulb moment. It changed, really went for it. And we'll never know. We'll never know what the ultimate reason was, but you can damn well say that one of the big ones was that the injury crisis that happened from back end of January, early part of February, that has lasted for the entirety of 2024 and some into this year already, played a massive part in the fortunes in that division, because there was very clear signs that things were changing. But then from the moment of arguably the Bournemouth game, where you're 3-0 up and lose 4-3, that almost set the tone for everything that's unfortunately followed. And we thought that would change back in the Championship, and it kind of hasn't really. So in that sense, the writing was on the wall. I think the timing is probably, maybe it's a bit too late. We won't know. Again, it's the fullness of time thing. But there were some obvious points in this season where people will point to, and the Middlesbrough one will be one of those games purely on the fact of what Rob was saying in his post match there, and it kind of felt like the end, and then it wasn't, and then home form kept him afloat until it hasn't against Norwich. 4 defeats on the bounce as we are at the moment, and a 10-game losing streak on the road. He acknowledged himself. That's not good enough, and I think he knew. He knew the situation. I think everybody does, but it kind of felt for a while that, and we referenced it ourselves, the available evidence at the time was that it wasn't going anywhere, and now we're in the situation where he's now gone, and we're looking for another manager.
We are, yep. We'll come on to who that might be shortly. Ultimately, stories just have an ending, don't they? The John Steele story was brilliant, but it had a natural ending. This one probably had a chapter or two too many in the book, to be quite honest with you. That Middlesbrough game, it just felt like the time, not least because you referenced the comments, we lost the game 5-1. It was a heavy thumping against a team who 2 seasons ago in the Championship we were battling with on an even keel. It was a wake-up call, really, or it should have been, and it wasn't. But I want to sort of reflect on Rob's time as a whole. Just over 2 years in charge of the club. 2 years, 2 months officially, but the first month obviously was getting to know everyone whilst the World Cup was going on in Qatar. Started at Middlesbrough, didn't it, with a sort of indifferent display, 2-1 defeat, having been 1-0 up, but immediately at home caught fire. Thanks to that, we referenced it so many times in this podcast, and probably will keep on referencing it because it's one of the highlights of the last 5 years or so. That game against Norwich, where he brought Cauley Woodrow off the bench after going down to 10 men, which is very much in keeping with what you've just said, why it was he who got us promoted. Couldn't win a big game for love nor money under Nathan Jones, for all the good that he did. Could not win a big game. Could not lose a big game under Rob Edwards for 6 months. And from that Cauley Woodrow banger in the top corner, we just went places.
Yeah, I think the reason why we mention it so is because the emotions of it were incredible. Like the goal itself was technical brilliance. The timing of it was wonderful. But for everybody that wants to say that he didn't know what to do this season, or didn't know how to change it or stuff, or that he never did, that's not accurate as well, because that one game set the blueprint for the beginning of the Rob Edwards era, which was, rather than, there was a man down in that game, should have lost it. He put on attacking subs, and the attacking subs went and won the game, and that's what he did. And he was very bold in his changes, which is it's really difficult to try and marry the two together, of that early part of Rob Edwards' tenure to this part, where the substitutions and changes or lack thereof have been a major talking point for this season. It's really difficult to see where that went on, but to say that he never was able to change it was not true. But that probably makes it even harder to understand how we've got to this point.
Yeah, it's probably a losing mentality's crept in without really taking a step back and looking at it. When you're used to losing, I guess the mindset is that you're going to lose, and it works the same way as we saw in the first 6 months of his tenure. Obviously, the first sort of genuine highlight in terms of a day we'll never forget came on April Fool's Day, 2024, when 2023, when Watford came to town. Bearing in mind they battered us at their place, absolutely battered us. Another sign that we could not win big games under Nathan Jones. I mean, we didn't even compete in that one, let alone have a chance of winning it. And revenge needed to be sweet. And it was revenge not just for Rob Edwards, obviously, having been sacked from them earlier in the season, for Gabe Osho, having scored the opening goal. But there were many times under Rob Edwards' tenure where the roof came off the Kenny. And when Alan Campbell scored the second goal of that afternoon, that was the first. That was the sign. I think that was the sign for many. Although Rob had told us to dream and we'd had some good results in the build-up to the derby, that was the time for many where you thought, do you know what? It's on. It's really on here.
Yeah, it felt like it. There was just this real momentum that gathered all the time with we're talking about this season where we've gone away and got nothing away. You'd go away to other grounds, big grounds, and say we're going to win that 1-0, and you would. And then at home, just steamroller teams as well, not necessarily with the amount of goals, but in terms of a real solid, determined, full throttle performance. And that one against Watford was totally it. They absolutely shrunk and couldn't cope, the Watford players, on top of Luton being absolutely fantastic and playing out of their skins. It was one of the best atmospheres and days. We'd waited so long for that. You know, I'd been fortunate enough to cover the game before, but there was a COVID season. There was no one in the ground when I was there. It didn't have the same effect, even though everybody was buzzing when Colo put in that penalty. And so to have that for such a long time, never having that contest, and it just absolutely went off, was, yeah, one of the best games I've ever been at as a punter or as a writer. Anything. It was electric, and it wasn't the only one. It wasn't a one-off. It was just because against the rivals, it had an extra spice as well. But then, I'm sure you're going to reference it as well, but the playoff semi-final second leg.
Might have a word or two on that, to be fair.
But yeah, that game, that 5 months, 6 months was incredible. And, you know, all the way, it felt like sometimes you often hear people talk back on like sporting documentaries and things where they just come up with this phrase, which doesn't really mean anything at the time. But when you look back on hindsight, it's just written in the stars that was going to happen. You know, whether you believe in fate or any of that stuff at all, sometimes it just feels like that. And there's certain stories which go like that. When you look back on that first half season of his, it just felt like everything was going to be coming up Luton, and it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back from the stadium flight, though, it looked like, you know, we'd given it all, but we were going to come up short. But no, the determination, the fight, the will to win, to turn that second leg around was incredible, wasn't it? I mean, you know, Rob was calling in the pre-match press conference for atmospheres that he's never heard before. My, did he get it? You know, and from the moment that we equalised on the tie overall, I mean, the noise was electric. And then when Tom scored what turned out to be the winner to send us to Wembley, it was just absolutely something else, wasn't it? And yeah, that's a night that, you know, I'll never ever forget. Well, again, we've referenced it so many times, but would we have turned that round in the past? I have my doubts. But there was never a doubt on the night that we were going to turn it around.
Yeah, special nights. And, you know, obviously the nights at Kenilworth Road are numbered. We know that now. And that will be up there in recent living memory for so many people. You know, the people in the ground obviously felt it, but then people outside of the ground in the town watching it on the telly and stuff, there was this huge like coming together feeling about Luton. And it's not always there, you know. I'm a proud Lutonian, but it's not always there, and it's kind of not at the moment. But when it is, it's just this real uplifting thing that just sort of it almost carried me down Hazelbury Crescent and stuff. And I was walking out the ground, having done loads of interviews afterwards. Everyone else had buggered off to the pub. There was no one around, but I just sort of floated down there and just saw the scenes afterwards on social media where the Bhangra drums were playing and everybody came together, and it was that's the power of football when it goes right. Almost unique to anything else, because I love music, and music is more consistent in the good feeling it gets, because the good stuff you like, you can listen to it again and you go and watch it and it's almost always good. But football, there's the jeopardy of it could be bad, it could be good, but when it is good, it's just the best thing in the world. And that's what we had at that point. And it carried largely through the Premier League season, and it kind of, that's why the stark contrast between that and this season in the Championship has been so difficult to take, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. The reason why this is a sad day for Luton fans is because this is the guy who gave us Premier League football. It's the guy who gave us the greatest moment many of us have ever had. Those of you who were around supporting Luton in 1988, you might argue it, but if you were born in 1989 onwards, the greatest day you've had as a Luton fan was May the 27th, 2023 at Wembley Stadium. The build-up to the game was incredible. I've not known anything like it. I mean, obviously, I have to do lots of media requests. As the media officer of the Trust, I was getting media requests from places I didn't even know existed. Didn't even know they had an interest in football. I was still getting it. It was incredible. For 10 days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. And then the day itself, boiling hot day, you got to go right the way through till 4:45 before kick-off. The only thing you can do is have a few sherbets and, a few drinks before the game. And the game itself, the nerve-wracking nature of extra time, the penalty shootout, then the release of emotion. You'll remember it in the press box. I'll never forget it in the Luton end, hugging people that I don't know to this day, still don't know, and probably will never see again unless, we meet at a Luton game. It was just incredible. And, scenes like that, no Luton fan will ever forget. And that is why, whilst it is the right decision, there are lots of people out there today who are still got a tinge of sadness about it, because Rob delivered a dream of all of ours via a very special day.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I've referenced it quite a lot this season at the beginning and quite a lot recently, that the feeling that we all had then, and so maybe this is the thing with age, but I've become quite a soppy old sod, and for that month after the final, I just spontaneously burst out into happy tears every now and again, and that's rare, and those sorts of moments when just everything felt good and right. And so the unity was there. We had his song, We've Got Super Robbie Edwards, and that was sung everywhere, and it was to the same levels and even more of the stuff we'd seen in the lower leagues. Sometimes we reference the Notts County away game where promotion was clinched, and it was just that one side of Meadow Lane that was just Luton, and I was on the other side. I saw it. All that stuff was brilliant, but this stuff was better somehow. And my worry was always that unity would go and disappear. And to all intents and purposes, it has, and that's sad to me, because it takes so long to build that up. Because football is not always success. It's not. Most of the time, it's not, unless you're the big clubs. Who win all the time, then it's not. You've got to take these moments when they come and really hang on to them. And it's a long time to build up, a long time to achieve, and very quick to disappear. And how you get that back, I don't know. There was something in me the day of the QPR game, I think it was, where the club released the news that Ronnie Henry had come back as an academy coach. Me thinking, if anything's written in the stars, wouldn't it be great if Ronnie Henry comes back to sort out this situation for a second time? But I think that's going to be a longer term fix. Really good to see him back there. But that's what we had. We had this unity. The town felt great. the club felt great, and now we're in this position where we're thinking, well, what's next? It's a really, really tricky decision, a difficult appointment to get right, because Luton are still, and will for a while, until that stadium's built, and maybe even for a little bit longer until it settles in and establishes themselves there. Luton are going to have to punch above their weight. And how you get that back is the tricky, tricky thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We might always be punching above our weight. I mean, Brentford and Brighton are ensconced in the Premier League now, but I don't think anyone can suggest that they're not punching above their weight. Being there, it's no disrespect to them. It's what it is, Even now, every season, if Brentford finish between 11th and 15th, that's a good season, and that's just how it is, isn't it? That's how this country's been allowed to manifest itself in a footballing point of view. I mean, we've done the Premier League season, we've had the highs and the lows of the Premier League season. I mentioned them in the immediate reaction that we did. The Everton away, the first win in the Premier League, Chong's opener against Liverpool at Kenilworth Road. That magical night of so much emotion at home to Brighton, with the Tom lap of honour, the incredible start, Hashioka's lap of honour at half time, and the 4-4 at Newcastle, the 2-1 against Bournemouth, so many great times in the Premier League, that we hoped that he would take us back there, and ultimately that's not how it's proven to be. This season just has not gone to plan. Nothing's gone right. The longer it's gone on, Rob started to look more and more broken. He disputed that, and we left it be. And that's absolutely fine. But yeah, the writing's been on the wall for a while, as I said earlier in the podcast. Middlesbrough would have been the right time to go. Having not done it at Middlesbrough, this was the only time left to do it. Yeah, with a little break until the next league game. Otherwise, you're going to be you might be risking 3 points if you did it somewhere else, because there'd be too much chopping and changing and things. The next international break's not till March. It would have been too late by then if nothing could have changed. So this was the time, if you hadn't done it at Middlesbrough, when, as you said, to all intents and purposes, that was kind of the time, really. I'm glad it's happened, because it was in danger of souring further. That song's a thing of the past, and
Yeah, it's not been sung.
No.
I think I've heard it sung once this season.
yeah, it's a thing of the past now, and that's a shame. And hopefully, in the as I say, as history looks back on it, that song will be remembered, and everything around that first 18 months of his tenure will be remembered, rather than the last 3 months. We can forget, assuming Luton stay up this season, and let's hope we will, and a new manager bounce and everything else that comes with it, that every team around us has got, that we get that as well, and we stay up, then time will be favourable, and we'll remember the good times of Rob, rather than the potential damage that might have happened by hanging on for too long. But we do need a new manager. Are we the same prospect that we was even when we played Middlesbrough? Who knows? Time will tell when we know who's sat in the hot seat. That's the only time we'd be able to judge it. First thing to acknowledge is a popular appointment from those when we had to discuss it after the Middlesbrough game, because we thought that Rob was saying goodbye then, was Mark Robbins. He's no longer on the market. He's gone to Stoke, and as quickly as Stoke sack managers, I don't suppose they're going to sack him in time for us to appoint him. He's gone. I have to say, he wouldn't have been my first choice anyway. I said it at the time. Luton don't look at coaches in their 50s anymore. That might change here. We'll come on to that in a second. But he's gone. Safe sort of guardians in the Championship, like Gary Rowett, has also gone as well. So there's a couple that have left the list, really, that if this appointment isn't right, the delay of it will look even worse, really.
That's why I say it's a very, very delicate and difficult decision, I would imagine, because the outlook for recruiting managers is almost the same as the outlook that has been for recruiting players, which is to find young, hungry coaches with a point to prove. And that's what they went for with Nathan, and they got it. That's essentially what they went for with Graham Jones, but that didn't work out. And they, again, even more so probably with Rob Edwards, because he'd been with that lot down the road. At the time, I saw it and thought, yeah, that he'd be the best bloke, but they'd never go for him because of that, and they did, and they proved me wrong. No problem with that whatsoever, because of what we've spoken about, what happened immediately when he came to the club. But so it's whether they change that viewpoint as to who they can get in, I suppose, because there could be, we don't know at the moment, there could be even scope for, say, they're going to get somebody in just to sort of marshal the end of the season and then look again in the summer. I would imagine that's probably not on the cards, but it's an option until it isn't, if you know what I mean. So
well, that option's generally Mick Harford, isn't it? And I don't think he's of an age or health profile now that he could do 5 months of a relegation battle, of which 2 of them are going to be a relegation battle. Even if you have a good 2 months, you're not going to escape within 2 months because the other team's picking up as well. And, we're in the position that we're in. The very least, we're going to be in a relegation battle until March just because of the sheer volume of games and everything. And the teams that are also playing in and around us that have got games in hand and things like that. I think it's not until we play Sheffield United that every team will be on a level number of games. I think that's when all the other teams catch up with their games in hand. So is Mick fit for that? I can't see it.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily thinking that Mick would do it, because I think for you, I think that is probably a rescue job too far, and he's done amazingly in the times that he has had to come in and step in and
but
do
it
that
needs a
job.
new voice, doesn't it? I don't think
so.
it can be a member of the current coaching staff. I don't think it needs, if it's going to be someone from within that takes the job on for a little while, it needs to be someone from the academy who hasn't had the voice of the first team. The first team needs a fresh outlook or a fresh voice and a fresh energy at the very least. Whereas when Mick did it after Nathan decided to do the dirty on us the first time round, it was very much a we're going okay, just plod on how you are kind of thing. Now we're not going okay, and it needs to change. So it needs a different voice. Who that might be, who knows? I mean, I'd be very surprised if the appointment's not in place by Preston. I probably would be surprised because, again, these next 5 games could be pivotal to our season. You just look at who they're against: Preston at home, Oxford away, Millwall at home, Sheffield Wednesday away, Plymouth at home. That's 3 of the teams in and around you, and 2 sides that have, one side in Millwall that have just changed their manager as well, so they're clearly not going anywhere. So I would be surprised if the appointment isn't in by Preston, but at the very least it has to be in by the time Millwall are here. So 2 games of an interim. I don't think we can afford too many more than that.
Yeah, well, the way they've always framed it is that they always know who the next bloke's going to come in, but you've then got they've got to be available, and then they've got to want to as well. So there will be an element of a recruitment process, I guess. How quick that can be remains to be seen.
There's no evidence that this is a West Ham who've appointed their manager before they sacked the previous one.
I'd be very surprised. That's not kind of the way that the club go about their business, is that they're very conscientious in the way they try and sign players, and you would assume and managers as well.
And one of the reasons why it took so long to sack Rob is the respect that everyone has behind the scenes for Rob, and quite rightly so. He's gave them days that they won't forget and built a legacy of this football club that cannot be replaced in terms of power court and everything like that via the Premier League season. So that's fair enough. So candidates who could be available then, I mean, I had a quick search on social media. It's not always the greatest landscape, but there are some sensible people out there. Some of the options probably aren't realistic anymore. The one that seems to come up an awful lot is Steve Cooper. Now, I don't know if that's realistic.
I don't think it is.
You don't?
I know he's managed some big clubs in the Premier League, and I think that's where you aim your attentions. If you're that guy, you'd have to come down with a bit of a financial incentive, maybe, or I don't think he wants to get involved. He's not in the position in the managerial career where he'd want to be involved in a championship relegation battle, I don't think.
Probably not. But he was at Notts Forest, wasn't he, when he went there? I mean, Premier League-wise, he's only really got Everton, hasn't he? Obviously, West Ham have replaced Lopetegui with Graham Potter. Wolves have already changed their manager. Ipswich aren't going to change their manager. Leicester and Southampton have already changed their managers. It's only Everton really that are teetering on the edge of potentially changing, and they've just got high-profile owners who will undoubtedly go for a big name, a Jose Mourinho type or something like that. So there isn't a Premier League role for Steve Cooper. So maybe he might look at it as if to say, well, if I'm getting back in the Premier League, it has to be I take a team to the Premier League. Now, the problem we would have there is West Brom are much higher up the Championship food chain right now. I don't know if Steve Cooper's a West Brom target, but if he is, he's much closer to the Premier League at West Brom than he would be at Luton. There was a bit of talk that he rejected Cardiff earlier in the season because he wanted a higher up club, which would again suggest that he's out of our reach. But from a coaching standpoint, I'd have absolutely no problem with him. He wouldn't be my first choice, but he does tick the box. I think the credentials that we need here, first and foremost, a new manager who plays three at the back is going to have a seriously tough time winning this fan base over because we've just got fed up of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a new manager with three at the back could get it working, but there is just no evidence in football right now, and you can use Manchester United as a prime example, that three at the back works. That is a guy who was winning lots and lots of football matches, who's gone to Man United with a three at the back. It just doesn't work in this country. There's no evidence of it. We need to play a back four, the formation that we played at QPR. We also need, we spoke about it in the QPR podcast. We've got a lot of young players that are either in the team or on the fringes of the team. So you need a manager who can up coach youngsters. That's imperative. Generally, the signings that seem to be talked about, or in Christ's case, happening, are young signings. They're obviously going down, and it would fit in with the David Wilkinson comments of recently about the long-term vision, that signings are going to be young. So you need a manager or a coach, who can make players better from that age. That would be a Steve Cooper, having won the World Cup with the under-17s at England. And you also need a manager who's going to play, like I say, a modern formation, and a formation that can tweak. You can't, in football these days, particularly if we're going to get to where we were in terms of the Premier League, and I'm not saying that's going to happen immediately, whoever the manager is, but surely that's the end game to get back to the Premier League. You can't go in the Premier League with a one-size-fits-all approach. You have to be flexible week in, week out, minute in, minute out. So you have to have a good in-game tactician. Again, that may well be Cooper, it may well not be, but I think they're the credentials that we're looking at. So Cooper would fit all of that. Now, whether he's within our financial package or interest is a different story, but I can see why lots of people are looking at Cooper. If he isn't, some others have mentioned Steven Schumacher, most recently at Stoke. Probably not going to hold that against him. They're a basket case. They're already on another manager since then, and they only sacked him in September. So that wouldn't be like a bad thing. Won League One with Plymouth. Let's hope he has to go nowhere near there if he's a Luton manager. And didn't do anything wrong at Plymouth. Kept them in the division last season, or was on the way to keeping them in the division when he left for Stoke. He would fit all of the criteria that I've just outlaid.
I think he would, but we did discuss him as he was in the bookies list when earlier in the season there was rumours about Rob Edwards, and yeah, he got Plymouth up, didn't he? But I think that once he got into the Championship, it didn't quite work there. So that doesn't strike me as the same profile, because if you look at Rob Edwards, yeah, he'd had the period down the road where they mugged him off after 10 or 11 games, but he was a league winner with Forest Green before that. So I don't know if he's definitely be an option, because he's an available man, isn't he? So, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. But then, who saw Rob Edwards or Nathan Jones coming along, or even to that extent Graham Jones, although wasn't as successful at all. But it always seems to come a bit more from left field, which is why I think Cooper's is an obvious one, but I don't think he would. Albeit he took Forest from, the bottom of the Championship to promotion. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a gut feel, really. I don't think that would be the one.
No, I mean, it's fair enough. Do we go for a survival specialist just to ensure we're in the Championship next season, and then maybe think again in the summer?
Yeah, that was more what I was saying about maybe someone just to hold the fort until the summer and then you could look again. But
I mean, you'd need to find that person, wouldn't you? I mean, generally, when you look at survival specialists, well, in this division, Neil Warnock, he would not be tolerated at Luton, and probably he's past. I know he kept Huddersfield up a couple of seasons ago, but he's probably past his best now. I wouldn't want him to come and do that again. I mean, the football's been hard enough to watch in the last couple of months that it is without watching Warnock, and invariably he brings an assistant manager with him who has no time and place in Luton anymore anyway, in Blackwell, so that's a non-starter. Rowett would be a safe hand, but he's just gone to Oxford. As I say, Robbins has gone to Stoke. There aren't many of those sort of survival specialists doing the rounds anyway, so that kind of muddies the water a little bit more. I mean, just following the Plymouth sort of managerial exploits recently, because obviously very similar in the league table, I'd like to think we can attract a slightly better calibre of manager than Plymouth, just by virtue of the fact that we have just been in the Premier League and they've just been in League One a couple of seasons ago.
You're not going to say Wayne Rooney, are you?
No, but they apparently their initial interest was David Wagner, the former Huddersfield and Norwich manager. His Huddersfield side, to be fair, any manager who can get Huddersfield in the Premier League, and no disrespect to Huddersfield, has to be tactically astute. But they drew a lot of games. They drew all the games in the playoffs and kept on winning on penalties. And when they were in the Premier League, they didn't really offer a great deal to the party to suggest to me that he's anything other than a sort of safety-first coach. And he messed up last season with Norwich. Eventually, they did enough to get into the playoffs. And then when they got into the playoffs, they forgot they were in them and got absolutely trounced by Leeds, didn't they? And that's a Leeds side who didn't turn up in the final. I think he takes you so far, but I don't think his football would be universally popular, albeit we might have a defence that can defend. Don't think we'd offer enough in attack to satisfy. And ultimately, I don't think he could take you much beyond where we are now anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a lot of moving parts to it, isn't it? But I think one thing that is for sure is the long-term, the long game nature of what Luton want to do across the board in every aspect. And I don't think that would be that appointment. It would be short-term, maybe not necessarily just to the summer, but gets to next season, and then by this season's standards, a mid-table finish would be progress. But does it just feel a bit nothing then? Do you know what I mean? That's not the right word, but
I also think when managers who are linked with clubs don't then take that job, they're looking for a few quid as well as the potential of the club, because otherwise you're better off earning a few quid than no quid at all, sort of thing. So not sure about him. One early rumor that's done the rounds that I can't believe is true in any way, shape or form.
I know what you're going to say,
but it's there, so we've got to discuss it. And given that you're wearing a green top as well, you're blending quite nicely.
Pure coincidence.
Is Neil Lennon. Now, you talk about left field appointments. I mean, this would be so far left that you'd need binoculars to see it. It's out there, and there's no smoke without fire at times. But not sure that's getting my juices flowing, Jimbo.
Well, it's how do you judge that when he's largely managed in Scotland? I know he's been in Europe more recently.
6 games, I think, in his last job at Rapid Bucharest.
Was it?
Don't know the ins and outs of why he left. Only lost one of them, so I'm presuming it's not on results. 6 games, though.
How do you judge the the Scottish division. When you're a manager with Celtic, you should be winning everything, really, and he did win most everything. But then he had the one time down in English management, was Bolton, was it? Didn't put up any trees, so it's difficult. The one thing you get with him is a ranter and a raver and a really intense Nathan Jones-esque like persona. But I can't speak to his football really because I just didn't watch. I don't watch Scottish football.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. But like you, I mean, if he was particularly good, he'd have had a better job than Rapid Bucharest in recent times, you would think. There's got to be a reason why. It's not like there's a lack of jobs. Even in the Championship, it's not like there's a lack of jobs. One pops up every fortnight, and no one's wanted to take him. So there must be something in that. Listen, he might be really, really good. I didn't watch Celtic. You only have to watch 4 games, Celtic against Rangers, and in the second part of it, I think Steven Gerrard was the opponent. Says a lot, doesn't it? What's he done since he left Rangers, working it in the other way? Postecoglou, not exactly pulling up trees either with a decent reputation at Celtic. It's just so tough to call. And he's in his 50s. There's not an awful lot of longevity in terms of the long-term plan or anything like that. It's in a Scottish newspaper. I don't know how reputable it is, but it's there, so it was worth discussing. If you had free rein, Jimbo, we haven't had an awful lot of time to dissect it, but if you had free rein, who would you have? And I will come on for those of you that are thinking it about Nathan Jones. We will talk about it in a minute because there are still plenty of you out there who want him back. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you had free rein, if you was Gary Sweet, and you're not obviously, but if you was, who would your first port of call would be to ring up an agent?
I think there's not a lot of choices out there, but I think for somebody that gets the club and loves the club, and somebody that's done all right so far in a very small
You're
window.
ticking my boxes so far.
Very small window of opportunity, but okay. And I heard good things. Would be Alan Sheehan.
Alan Sheehan, Swansea assistant manager. Swansea's manager is heavily linked with West Brom. That would make the life a lot easier, wouldn't it, if West Brom take their manager? No problem at all. She's dog coming back. Just wonder if it's the job for a first timer, though. That's all.
That's my only reticence.
If we go down your route of experienced head till the end of the season with Sheehan working to take over in the summer,
that's my only feeling about. That's my only sort of reticence about that appointment. I think all the other metrics that previously have been part of the decision making, from what we know anyway, he would fit that. And I don't necessarily always think you need to have an emotional connection to a club to come in and do the job. I mean, Rob didn't, and Nathan was here before as a player, so maybe something there.
Yeah, John still didn't.
Yeah, John still didn't. But in terms of sort of a feeling where you do need to come in and hit the ground running, wouldn't have that bedding in period of the environment of the place, and he came up in the successful years, so he knows what Luton was about and what we want it to be about again. But it's a risk. It's a risk.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Sheehan for Jimbo. Yeah, it's fair enough. I gave you free rein. You gave me an answer.
What about you then? What would be your pick on the available? Not Fantasyland, but the available.
So it has to be without a club, or
Well, presumably they can pay the compensation for a manager if he really fits the bill and wants to come. So if you've got that in your locker, then do tell. But
in which case, I'm learning my French lingo and getting on the dog and bone to Strasbourg and finding out how much I need to pay to get Liam Rosenior out of there and in this football club.
Yeah, I know. I thought you might say that. Well, I know you would say it because we've that before. Yeah, it's a great shout, because what Hull were thinking about getting rid of him when he was doing so well for them is beyond me.
That's a Hull that played 4-2-3-1.
Yeah. Surely he'd like to come back. I'd be made up with that. He's a really impressive young coach, I think, and the formations that he plays, and going abroad will will help and to expand your thinking as well. I mean, but he's largely played and managed in the Championship. He knows what the division is. So, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought of that one. That's a good one as well.
I mean, I don't know exactly of his sort of history, but his dad played for West Ham an awful lot. So I'm assuming his roots are somewhere in London, close to Luton. You know, he might say, don't be so stupid, I'm managing in a warm part of France. But I'd get on the dog and bone and find out first and foremost. He would be my first port of call. If he said, don't be so stupid, I'd then ring up the FA and say, do you know what? Does Lee Carsley want a club job? Because I really liked what he did with England. I really like what he does with the England under 21s. And they don't do these national jobs for very long because they all go into it wanting the day-to-day adrenaline rush of a club job.
Does he though? I think he's got it quite cushy because he went to the senior side, and it was being asked all the time, "Do you want it? Do you want it?" He was like, no. It wasn't non-committal, was he? Because he knew he'd go back into that job where the scrutiny and the pressure is not so big. But there's a great crop of under 21 England players that could go on and win titles under him. I don't know if that.
He might not.
Is that?
But again, I'm finding out before I look any. If Rosenior said no, thank you, I'm getting on the phone to him just to check. If he says no, then that's fine. We'll go and look at option number 3, and I don't have option number 3. They're my 2 options so far. I'm hoping one of them says yes. Let's get into talks. If Liam Rosenior's in front of you guys down at the Brace anytime soon, I'll be absolutely delighted. I really like him as a manager. Like you say, he was so badly treated at Hull. Where are Hull right now? Oh yeah, they're below us. So that hasn't gone to plan, has it? 2 managers on from Liam Rosenior as well within 6 months. You look at Wayne Rooney without Liam Rosenior, and he is a terrible manager. You look at Wayne Rooney at Derby with Liam Rosenior, with all the restrictions that they worked in. It was a competent manager. So that says to me that he had an awful lot of work going on with that. Actually, I will give you another name. To partner your Alan Sheehan one, if I was going down that left field route, I would go with Ashley Cole, but I don't know whether he wants to get into...
Ashley Cole from
I don't know if
Arsenal and Chelsea fan.
Apparently he's really highly rated as a coach.
Wow. Blimey, that is very left field.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to come at me with Alan McCormack.
I have to strongly say, generally when you leave under this regime, bridges are burnt, and you only come back when we need to send an SOS out. So that's why I've written off Alan McCormack. But yeah, I'd have no problem with that. But I still maintain it's not a job for a first coach. It's a job for someone with a bit of experience. He ticks every box for me, Rosenior, mate. He really does. Love the style of football. You'd have to get used to playing possession football. But hey, we've signed players to play possession football.
That was the order of the day at the beginning of this season. That's what we were told we were getting, and it didn't happen. And then we went more direct, and then we went so direct it was unrecognisable and really quite frustrating.
And that's what's got us into this position, isn't it? A load of muddled thinking and a load of mixed messaging, and before you know it, he's got a clear identity, Rosenior. He can clearly coach players up because he always got Liverpool youngsters at Hull. He had Tyler Morton at the heart of the midfield. That Carvalho fella, who I think he's at Brentford now, but he was on loan from Liverpool at Hull last season. He got good loan signings. That tells me that he's respected in the game, because those kind of clubs, Liverpool, they're not sending their players out here, there and anywhere. They're sending them out to get coaching improvement. So he's obviously respected in that regard, and hell, could we do with a Premier League loan or 2 in the coming month? And he wins games of Championship football. That Hull City side was good, but I wouldn't say it was 7th in the Championship good, but that's where they finished. He plays attacking football. He would be my option. If I'm Gary Sweet, I'm ringing up Liam Rosenior and saying, do you fancy our job?
You make some very good points, and you've won me over. I'd forgotten that you mentioned him a couple of months back. yeah, I'm with you on all those points. The reason I've already explained the reason for Sheehan. He would be able to hit the ground running, the connection to the club, and yeah, heard good things. But he's probably not as advanced in his coaching managerial career as Rosenior. So yeah, I'll join you on that.
We could have the two. Rosenior with Shees as his number 2, because he's going to need a number 2, isn't he?
You keep talking. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Well, that's all we want, a good time. That's a look at the runners and riders. Is that the way that the club go? Who knows? We'll find out. Generally, though, if you look back at their recent history, as Jimbo said earlier, there is a pattern of who they look for and the credentials that they look for within them. So we've given out a couple of names that might fit that criteria, but all will be revealed. And when the new manager is revealed and Jimbo's there asking him the questions, we'll report back with a proper podcast. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. Thanks for listening. It is a sad day. You know, none of us wanted Rob to not turn this around. We all had hope that Rob would turn this around. Unfortunately, the evidence in front of our eyes was becoming clearer by the day that that wasn't going to happen, and therefore we've had to part company with the man who's given us so many memories we'll never forget. And hopefully the new man, whoever it may be, or he may be rather, will deliver on plenty more memories. Time will tell with regards to that. Let us know who you fancy as the new manager. Hit the YouTube comments. We'll have a look through them. I'm sure you'll bring up plenty of options that we've not discussed. We've only discussed the bare few. We've not had too much time to really think about it. They're the ones on the top of our head. I suppose before we go, we do have to mention Nathan. It is the elephant in the room. He's been here twice. He's done the dirty on us once. He done the dirty on us a second time, but with a less sort of hateful nature of leaving. 3 times isn't a charm here, is it?
I wouldn't have thought so. To be quite honest, I don't really think there's much more discussion to be had. I know there's obviously some people that are calling for it, but he's not out of work at the moment, so you're paying compensation as well. And I think you talked about bridges being burnt. I was one of the most surprised when in COVID we were told that there was a press conference happening, and after a little bit of an introduction from Sweet, up popped Nathan Jones. That was the most surprise of anyone. I mean, he did the job, and then he got Luton to a point where they were comfortable in the Championship, and then to a point where they almost got promoted, but for injuries it could have happened. So he's been there and done it with Luton, but it doesn't strike me as third time's a charm. And again, it's a gut feel because all the evidence is that he can do it. But I wouldn't have thought so.
We've moved on. We're a different football club now. We've moved on from the young, hungry, come and follow my lead approach to the, I don't want to use the term prima donna because that's wrong, but they're players that are above the young and hungry now, aren't they? They're players that are more established in the upper echelons of the EFL rather than the lower ones with a point to prove. And he hasn't managed those kind of characters well at Stoke, and he didn't manage those kind of characters well at Southampton, and there's nothing to suggest he'll manage those kind of characters well back here. Full of gratitude for the job he did the first time round, even more so the second time round, but that good thing firmly came to an end when he left for Southampton. As far as I'm concerned, I think we need to look for a younger, progressive coach like he was when he arrived and for the first time. And as I say, that man for me is Liam Rosenior. That's it for this episode of the podcast. As I said at the start, it's an episode of the podcast that we didn't really ever want to record because we wanted things to turn around under Rob, but it hasn't happened, and a new era will begin at some point in the not too distant future. Thanks very much to the Barber Club and the Lower Level for hosting our studio as always, to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music, and to Ed Smith Creative for the designs that you see on set. From Jimbo and myself, until next time, come on you Hatters.
For me, it's the people and the spirit of the people as well.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.